Hello chess fans, I'm absolutely thrilled to present you one of the most exciting games I have seen recently. It's played in an online event at chess.com, the so-called Julius Baer Generations Cup. It's part of the Champions Chess Tour, and White is a very strong grandmaster from Germany, Alexander Donchenko, and he's playing against world's number 4, Fabiano Caruana. As I said, an absolutely exciting, maybe even insane game, as a lot of interesting tactical things are happening on the board. So that's what you like to see, and that's what I would like to present to you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you do like my videos, for instance, from the Olympiad. But of course, there are many more interesting events to come very soon. Let's dive straight into the action as we have one d4 on the board. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, and here the move g3, the Catalan opening. And now, Fabiano Caruana goes again for the same offbeat system he played against Gukesh recently at the Olympiad in Budapest. He goes for this move knight c6, and after bishop g2, the strange looking move rook b8. What are these pieces going to do? Well, as I explained back then, the plan here is to take on c4, following it up by the move b5. If you're interested in the theory about this specific line, maybe you can also check out that particular video. Gukesh played here the move pawn takes d5. Donchenko deviates here with the move knight bd2 instead. But it looks like it doesn't come as a surprise to Caruana. He goes for bishop e7, castling kingside, and as you can see, black is not really interested to take on c4, as it will help white to improve that knight by recapturing on c4. So white goes for different setup with the move b3, and here another interesting point of black's play, and this must have been part of some sort of home preparation, as Caruana plays here the move b5, trying to activate a rook by opening the b file. Very interesting and unusual concept. White decides to take the pawn on d5, and black does recapture with the e-pawn. So we have this typical structure in which white has an extra pawn in the center, black has an extra pawn on the c file. Also, hard to say what white should do next. His next couple of moves are pretty logical. Bishop b2. Now black improves the bishop by placing it on d6, so that after this move knight e5, of course, black is not tempted to take, because after pawn recaptures, both the bishop and the knight are under an attack. But black responds very calmly here with queen e8. So the queen defends the knight. And here you also see that now the knight on e5 is under attack 3 times. So knight df3, and the bishop comes to f5. So interesting position. I think still this was part of Fabi's prep, or at least he must have seen similar ideas before. Otherwise, the setup with rook b8 and b5, it does look a bit strange. White played very natural move rook to c1 to exert pressure against that knight on c6. But here another interesting point of black's play, rook b6. The rook is activated in this way, defending the knight on c6. White goes for the move e3. Black jumps in with a knight to e4. Queen e2. So here you see that the queen is eyeing the pawn on b5. It's still defended, but in certain cases you can see that white wants to take to deflect the rook. So the pawn on b5 is a potential target. But here black goes away with the knight to e7. So keeps the tension on the board. Knight e2. White is offering the exchange of knights, and rook a6. The rook is hitting the pawn on a2. I mean, this is a very unusual type of position. I cannot remember having seen such a middle game structure in a top level game. White got to do something about that pawn on a2. You cannot take on b5 because the queen is defending the pawn there. So white played here the move rook a1. It feels like a serious concession. On the other hand, what is black going to do? And well, there are different ways of playing. One plan I do like is, for instance, to take on d2. And if you take back, now the queen is no longer on e2. Maybe you can bring up the h-pawn to go h4 and so on. But Fabi had a different idea. And to be honest, I really dislike his next move, because I think this bishop is a very important piece. It does cover the backward pawn on the c file. It does exert pressure against the knight on e5. Anyway, it takes away a lot of squares from white's pieces. But he goes here for this plan with bishop a3. But Fabi is a very concrete player, so he initiates the exchange of dark squared bishops. But instead of recapturing right away, he inserts this move, knight c3. He does hit the queen. The queen goes back to e1. And only now there's a rook takes a3. And you do see that all of a sudden there is this bit of pressure against the pawn on a2. But anyway, black's pieces are unprotected. And with the move knight dc4, you hit the rook and you also hit the knight. So after pawn takes c4, queen takes c3, white untangles. And at the end of the day, I think, first of all, the rook does look a bit strange. But also, these pawns, they are quite vulnerable. Looks like white is quite active here. Well, anyway, queen b8 played. So the queen does exert pressure against the pawn on b3. So there are ideas to win material. But the queen goes back to c1, getting out of the pin. So that after the rook goes away, you can take on c4. Looks like white is going to win. Very healthy pawn. But now things are sharpening up. This must have been calculated by both players. f6. Interesting move. Attacking the knight. If the knight goes back, let's say to f3, I'm pretty sure that black's plan had been here to go bishop d3 to hit the rook on f1 and be able to win the pawn back on c4. I mean, it's still looking quite nice for white, but I guess this was black's counter resource. But anyway, instead of dropping back with the knight, look at this. Pawn takes d5. We have a real piece sacrifice, as after pawn takes e5, black accepts the challenge, of course. Queen c4, attacking the rook. And then you also got to deal with ideas like d6 with a discover check against the king, against the knight. But queen c8 is a good move. Now, if you do go for this plan with d6, you're not winning back material, as you cannot take on e7 next. There is bishop to e6, solving that threat, attacking the queen, and therefore white doesn't have time to take the knight. So d6 not a possibility, but look at this. White instead played here the move e4. He wants to force the bishop to go to an inferior square. The bishop goes back to d7, and now it is pawn takes e5. And here we are. This position, white has 3 pawns for the knight. And as you can see, black's pieces, they are kind of stuck at the last couple of ranks. So it's very difficult for black here to become active. Black goes for this move, king h8, to avoid anytime soon this discover check with d6. And white, what's white going to do? White, of course, is going to support the march of his pawns. But first, let's activate the other pieces here with rook ac1 attacking the pawn on c7, knight g6 played, attacking the pawn on e5. You don't want to give up that pawn no matter what. So e6 is a good move, attacking the bishop. And the bishop is also forced to go to a worse square. Bishop a4. It is still protected, but black's pieces are not doing much at all. Queen takes pawn. That's pawn number 4. And you can see that if pieces are coming off the board, the pawns in the center, they will gain in strength. So black is not interested, doesn't cooperate, keeps queens on the board. Queen e8. And now f4. Very nice idea. Knight goes back to e7. And look at this, d6. Attacking the knight. The knight comes over to c6. And then it's the next pawn, e7. Attacking the rook. The rook goes back to g8, keeping the back rank covered. And now it's the move e5. And here we are. Have you ever really seen something like this? Like a pawn on h2, g3, f4, e5, d6, e7. It's probably one of the most impressive pawn chains I've ever seen. And it's not only about the pawn chains, it's also about how these pawns are dominating the enemy's pieces. White's pieces look absolutely fantastic. The bishop on an open diagonal, hitting the knight. The rook is there, the queen is there. Black is trying to hold on here. But look at this. Now black, at least it's not a tempo move. So black does have time to create some sort of a counter attack. Played here the move bishop b5. Attacking the rook. Now there are various good moves, but rook fd1. feels very logical, as you want to support the march of your strong pawn. So what's black going to do? Well, look at this. Rook takes a2. Now, if you do play d7, probably you can still take on e7 and try to hold on. There are a lot of other problems here. Well, first of all, the bishop comes into d5, hitting the rook, hitting the other rook as well. The rook goes to b2. And probably here, Donchenko started to realize that he actually cannot take that rook on g8. It's something he would like to do, just a simple material gain. But look at the following line. Queen h5, massive counter threat against the pawn on h2. That will lead to checkmate instantly. The only way to defend in this case is h4, but then the queen comes into e2. And look at the queen and rook on the second rank, threatening checkmate. White cannot deliver checkmate here himself. The bishop is standing in the way on the back rank, so there's no way to give a check here, and black is going to win the game. Well, that's a very nasty counterattack by black, but of course, white realized here that the bishop cannot take on g8. I mean, you can move the bishop anywhere, can go back to f3 to prevent the queen to come to h5. I think that's a very sensible move. But Donchenko played here this move, rook to b1. And he wants to trade off black's most active piece, the rook on b2. However, here's this move. Queen h5, black ignores the threat because the rook on b2 can't be taken. If you do that, there's queen takes d1 with check. After king f2, queen f1, king e3, queen e1. The king is caught in a mating net. Look at the following line. King f3, knight e4 check. The knight comes in. After king g4, it's queen d1 check. King, for instance, goes to h4. And now this stunning move, g5 with check. All the squares are taken away. If you take with a pawn, it's knight f5. The queen covers the light squares. If you go king h3, you first bring another piece with tempo. Bishop f1, rook g2, for instance. And then it's queen h5 with checkmate. Everything comes with check. So you can't take the rook on b2. This queen is threatening to take on h2, otherwise if the rook moves from b1, there is queen takes d1, of course. White went here for a deep think. Played here this move h4, and is down to about 10 seconds for the rest of the game. Fabi is up to 1.5 minutes or so. Fabi goes queen e2, threatening mate on h2. Rook takes b2 played, queen takes d1, but here the difference is with a pawn on h4, the king can go to h2. Queen takes d5 though, gives black a second piece, but still everything defended. But you got to deal with these massive pawns on the in the center. Queen d7 played, preparing to promote the e pawn. And what should black do? Should black defend against these threats or look for counter-attacking ideas? Here Fabi went for quite a long think and missed a big opportunity. He could have gone here for knight b4 to attack the queen. Everything is well defended. And if you move the queen, let's say here, there's this idea to play bishop c6. And all of a sudden, black is taking over with massive threats against the king. However, knight takes e5 was played. That's also understandable, as you do hit the queen with both the bishop and the knight. However, the queen can take here on b5. The knight comes to g4. This is very tricky, guys, because where do you go with the king? Only 2 squares available. If you go to h3, black is winning instantly. There's knight f2. If the king goes back, it's queen h1 with checkmate. If you do take the knight on f2 with your rook, then the queen on b5 is no longer defended, and black is up a queen will win the game. So king h3 not possible. The king has to go back to g1. But here black does have some moves here with queen d4 check, king g2, queen e4, king g1. All of a sudden white is in pressure. His king is lacking support, and of course you can continue giving checks and probably the game ends in a draw. But being up on time, knight f6, Fabi wants to keep the game going, drops back with a knight to cover both the d7 and the e8 square. So white's pawns, they cannot move forward. Rook e2, nice consolidating move, attacking the queen. Queen gives check, king goes to g2. And here again, you can eliminate the pawn on d6. Let's say if you do that, you get a queen, knight takes, rook takes. Just don't take here another time because it will be back rank mate. But if you avoid it with h6, this queen endgame should be ending in a draw. But Fabi is playing for win. Goes here for this move. Rook e8, which is probably not such a good move. But what to do? I mean, here the key idea for white was missed by both players, is to challenge that knight on f6. Because the knight is a very important defender. And with rook to e6 threatening, rook takes f6, white all of a sudden is winning. There are no good checks because the rook and the queen, they're taking away so many squares. There's no check here. I mean, there's only one, queen d5, but you don't want to exchange queens. It runs into the advance of the d pawn, and white will queen on the next move. So missed chance, but white played here queen e5, hoping to exchange queens under favorable conditions, as you can take back with a pawn, and then the pawns are coming forward. Black played queen d3, rook e3, queen d1, rook e1, queen d3, rook e3. Repetition is possible. Black does avoid it with queen c4, queen e6. Again, offering the exchange of queens. Black is keeping queens on the board. Queen c6, king g1. And now, okay, if white has all the time in the world, which is not the case, he would like to go for something like g4, g5 and bring some new energy into the attack. But black goes for h5, which is a very double-edged move. You do create a square on g4 for your knight, but you also do weaken your own king more. Look at this, a rook e1 played, so the king doesn't run into any annoying check. a5, this pawn is also still on the board. I mean, everything is under control, and black is trying to deflect white's pieces from stopping that pawn so that eventually these central pawns, they can be eliminated. But rook e5, attacking the pawn. Queen c3, attacking the pawn on g3, defending the pawn. King g2, queen c6, king g1. And here you have this possible repetition, of course. Queen c3 can be played, queen c1. Both are enough for a draw. But Fabi continues with the move a4. And here again, big tactical moment in the game, as white could have played here this crushing move d7. This was possible. And what is the point? I mean, if you take with a knight, I mean, you can take the queen. You can also take on h5 with checkmate. That's one idea. If you do take with the queen yourself, the pawn, then you deflect the knight. Because it's rook takes h5. The king can't go anywhere. If you take the rook, it's queen takes d7. You're up a queen. While the alternative is to take the queen, but then you take yourself first, get a new queen, and after black takes it, you're up an exchange, winning endgame. Missed chance. Queen f7 played, a very understandable move. You get in touch with the rook. And there's also another plan, because black moves the pawn to a3. This pawn is 2 squares away from becoming a queen. But there's rook g5, threatening mate in 1. How to defend? Well, queen c1 is played. King to g2. And what to play here now? I mean, if you go for queen c6, it's probably a repetition, because you cannot hide with the king on h3. There's queen h1 with checkmate. I mean, you got to go back instead to g1, for instance. And then, I mean, black's queen does have enough squares to give her perpetual. But there followed queen c2, and then there is king h3, and the king is safe. The only check you have still is queen c8, but now the pawn comes to f5. So look at this original configuration. Rook is in the attack, hitting g7, supporting the pawn. And it's too late to defend the mating threat. If, for instance, you play rook g8, the most elegant way to finish the game off here is sacking the queen on h5. And after knight takes, it's rook takes with checkmate. King can't escape anymore. So here, down to seconds, Fabi desperately played here. Queen takes f5, but white takes the queen. And it was time to resign. Or I think Fabi even lost on time at this point. But I thought this was an absolutely incredible game with that massive, absolutely massive pawn formation. If you go back to that middle game with pawn on e5, here this is so instructive, as you see that the pawns, it's not that they're 1 point just. It's that they restricting black's most active pieces. These pieces are stuck on the back rank. The rook on a6 is offside. So you see the potential power of these pawns, and that's why I wanted to share this game with you. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. If you want to see more games from this event, or, well, we have many more exciting events coming up soon. More about that in one of the next videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and we'll see each other soon again.